welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademacher, Prescription for Your Transformation, Real People, Real Conversations, and Real Success. And as I finished the last connections here on Facebook, didn't have it all set up like I was supposed to. So I have a lot of respect for this particular group of people in this world. And the reason I have so much respect is because perhaps my own history, my own experience, and today's platform is really about conversations, authentic conversations with real people and their real success about things that matter, and particularly about things that perhaps we don't even talk about. And we know the truth about them, but we don't know how to talk about them. Perhaps we don't have enough insights about them. And that's what I love about this platform, because it's really all about what you don't know that you don't know that's going to make the difference in your life. And part of our own spiritual evolution, if that's what you want to call it, just a personal, individual revolution, as I like to call it sometimes, is where we get to get more evolved within ourselves, finding greater peace, greater insights, because of all the things that we know, because of all the experiences and perhaps all the new beliefs and decisions that allow us to have a much better relationship with the world around us. And so in talking about this particular group of people, and I say that with a little chuckle and a little smile, because I grew up respecting women intently. I had a beautiful mom. She was so wonderful to me in so many different ways. You know, I was like the baby boy. I was mama's boy, I guess, with two older brothers who beat me up all the time. So she came to my aid. I don't know what it was, but I had a lot of respect for my mother. And I have a lot of respect for women. And I think the challenge today for so many women is that they don't receive that respect. They don't receive the same kinds of opportunities. And that's something that I'll never be able to understand because I'm not a woman. And so today is about women and the permission that they should have and give themselves to really follow their dreams, to really kind of dig in deep and discover what their true talents are, you know, what their gifts are, and not keep them buried, not keep them in the shadow just because somebody else told you that that's the way that you must behave. And so for today, I'm very excited to be talking to Shannon Rey Gibbs, who is a coach for professional women to help them have that fulfillment in work in the things that they love to do. So Shannon, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Bart. Glad to be here.
So you've got a wonderful story that I'd like to start off with, because you've had that experience in so many different levels that has really allowed you to fine-tune your focus in life in this particular niche. And it's a niche that I think really deserves the attention, the focus, as well as the expertise and the insights that you're able to deliver at the highest level. So tell us about how you started getting in the sense in the corporate world at the age of 14.
Yeah, so I started working pretty early. And so when I was 14, I started working for my father's business. And he's always been an entrepreneur. So I grew up around an entrepreneurial father, although it took me 20 plus years to actually get there myself, which is interesting. But I loved working and I loved making money too. So I worked during high school and college, and eventually going off to college, I had to pick a major. And at that point, I really didn't know. It was more just my father said, go get a degree. This is what you need to do to be in the work world. Sounded like a great idea, so that's what I did. I went to school and got my degree, and started my journey from there. And throughout my career, I spent over 20 years in the corporate world. Actually, that's since college, so much longer than that if you go back to 14. So my journey really, I feel like at some point in my career, my career was on autopilot a little bit. I had a lot of great experiences along the way, and I'm very grateful for all of those experiences that I had. And it's what got me where I am today, because I learned so many great things about who I am and what my skills are and what my talents are. And so working in the world of human resources and recruiting, which is where I landed in my career, was a really good fit for me, because I love working with people. I love serving people. I love being a subject matter expert and also doing training. So, you want me to go through my whole story, Bart?
Well, no. So first of all, I want to dial back for a second. What were you doing at
Okay.
the age of 14? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I was doing office work. So I
Like,
was doing, yeah, billing and invoicing and reception work. It was a small office when I was working for my father. So it was not far from our house, and there was probably less than 10 employees. And I got to learn about a lot of different parts of the business, and I had a lot of flexibility, and my dad was very good to me.
awesome. Hey, Sedona, I'm hearing a lot of echo. Are you hearing the same thing?
No, I don't hear any echo.
Okay.
I
Are
can
you
hear a little
hearing?
echo as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing tons of echo, so I'm not sure where it's coming from. So maybe you can look into that and take care of that because we want to make sure we get a good, show today. So, but was it by your choice that you were able to, work with your dad, or was it expected and required? And what was that like? And one thing that you shared with me earlier on, because I think this is very, very relevant, is having that voice and perhaps not having that voice.
Yeah, so working for my father, really good question. It's so far back now. I feel like it was a choice. I feel like I really, I liked the idea of making money and having my own personal spending money. So that's what kept me going and motivated. And so for me, it was very exploratory. It was kind of fun back then. And, had a different meaning, at 14 when you're just working part-time, working your own hours and just doing it for some pocket change.
Yeah, I wish I could have done that, but my father was traveling all over the world, and he was in an industry where I couldn't partake, and so I never did get that chance. But I was probably more just one of those boys out there in the woods and making a mess of it. So I think let's dive into what's really going on. What's your perspective of what's happening, with women so often today? And if you can just share with us, what's your belief or perception of in what context many women find themselves in either at home, or in a career, and where they're not finding that fulfillment, and why they're not having that experience in their life. Just share with us, especially as guys who don't understand that, what's really going on, so we can help our partners, get a better handle on their own futures.
Yeah. So I would say one of the things that is a bit more of a unique experience for women is that often, whether in your family or culturally in society, women are often encouraged to be in a position of maybe serving others or pleasing other people, not rocking the boat or not really that they want. This is something that I think that tends to be nurtured a bit more with men, and I think is also what contributes to the statistics that men typically make more money than women in the same kind of roles. And I think part of that is that men, one, are more willing to want, and also they consider themselves qualified. I remember what the statistics are off of my head, but like a man may, have 50% of the qualifications and will apply for the job, but a woman feels like she needs to have 110% of the qualifications. So you get the gist of, women feel like they need a lot more before they'll go after something. And so that starts to shift the dynamic, that starts to tip the scales a little bit. So that's one piece. And another one for women, I think, is about, you'd mentioned like, finding your voice. So being okay with having a strong opinion or being okay with speaking your mind. So this is something that, a lot of people have done research on, written a lot of articles about, is women speaking up. And that can be as simple as maybe speaking up in a meeting in the corporate world, where they might, ask for permission or raise their hand, and a man will just speak. I think this is shifting. I think it's absolutely shifting and has come a very long way. But in my experience, just in the work world, when I worked in corporate for over 20 years, and then also in the work that I do coaching women, they still struggle with it. They're still really struggling with really finding their voice and being okay with speaking up and not worrying about what certain ramifications might be or how they might be viewed or judged.
Right. Well, I like to raise my hand, so I'm one of those people who raises their hand. What about you, Sedona? Do you raise your hand when you want to say something? Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Oh, your mic's not working. Are you plugged? Nope, can't plug you in. I know you did something about the echo, so maybe try it. Now we can hear you. Awesome. So do you raise your hand?
I do sometimes. There are certain classes where we're not allowed to.
Nope. My
Very
bad. Say that again?
I said there's some classes where I'm not permitted to raise my hand. That's pretty interesting. But other than that, I try to at least while somebody's like talking, just to kind of like signal that you have something to say, not necessarily as a permission thing, but just so that you're not like interrupting them in the middle of their statement.
I think it's interesting, that whole concept of, how we're communicating, and so many people are just so focused on themselves and what they're saying, and have absolutely no clue that other people actually want to say something as well. And so oftentimes I'll find myself like raising my hand and say, okay, your time's up. It's my turn, because I have something relevant to say. And but it's also interesting too that as you're speaking, and again, my perspective is that women naturally are better nurturers and better caretakers. And so if we're going to gravitate to what we're better at, because in my personal view of myself, I'm a great surgeon, but if I'm taking care of any of my friends or partners, I'm a hopeless nurse. So I'm great at the surgery part, but I'm useless at taking care of somebody. And I think many men are like that. They just don't have a clue as to how to be good for somebody else. And so one thing that in my practice that's great, when I see a man show up really concerned about their partner and able to nurse them really well. But the point that I'm getting at is that I think so many women are expected to be able to focus and be good at nurturing and caretaking others, that oftentimes they sacrifice themselves and make sure that everybody else's needs is taken care of first. And it's just part of maybe being a loving and compassionate person in parts, but also there's a part that says, look, I'm scared if I say anything. And so I think that's generally a challenge for so many women, and it's almost like they have to overcome that with more aggressiveness, and that then also hurts them too when they become too masculine in that environment. And so it's almost like you get penalized both ways. On the one hand, if you're too soft and sweet, and on the other hand, if you're too aggressive. I mean, am I accurate in that?
Yeah, I think it can be a really delicate balance for women. I've actually worked with a lot of really strong women that have balanced it well, where they have balanced the masculine and the feminine really well. I'd say most of my managers throughout my career have been women, and women that I've ended up being really good friends with. So yeah, but it can be a very fine line. Women can get a certain reputation if they're too forceful or too vocal or too masculine. They may not have as much respect, right? Or they could have some other challenges that creates for themselves. Absolutely.
I mean, if I may say this, on live radio and compliment both of you, is that I see that the power in your own femininity that you just own, that gets our attention. And I think that's awesome. And I just wish more women felt comfortable with that, so that they didn't have to be forceful, and then have men in general or women just give too much pushback because you're too aggressive, versus being, not forceful enough in the sense and not being hurt. And even I sometimes, I'm not vocal enough and realize, well, I'm not being heard right now. So what's the deal with that? And so I think men also are challenged there. But moving on, for women in particular, is that how do you coach women then? What's your process by helping women, become more, I should say, following the dreams and giving themselves, as you put it, permission to follow their dreams?
Hmm. Yeah. So it, it really depends. So each woman comes to me with, different challenges or in a different place in life and in their career. But there are definitely some common threads. And so some of those common threads are maybe first not even being clear about what it is that they want. They haven't done that kind of discovery before. I've had women tell me, like, I haven't paused to think like this, to think about what I really want. What do I really desire? So some of the workshops that I do with women is we really get into desires, like, what do you want? And some women just have a hard time really tapping into that. So we'll get really clear about what those desires are. And another part of that is also getting clear about strengths and talents. So I think it can be very common for women to underestimate their talents. And I've certainly done this myself, and I think probably can continue to work on this personally. But you think something that comes naturally to you or is easy is, you think, oh, well, it's not a big deal. That's not really a strength, or not, everybody else does this, or everybody else has this kind of strength. So I help them really call that out and go, actually, this is very unique. Like, this is an amazing talent that you have, and not everyone has the skill. So, so that's a big part of it. And then from there, there's a couple of things that come into play. So the giving yourself permission, right? They have to give themselves permission then to have what they want. So this is a phrase, when I use it with women, really resonates with them. They're like, oh, I like that, give myself permission. And it's really just that simple. And that is often tied to a lot of, deeper rooted belief systems and structures that were created, maybe in our family environment and in culture and society, and just questioning what those beliefs are. I think, I know personally, I went through much of life not questioning certain belief structures or beliefs about who I am, beliefs about my power and me having a voice in the world. I had to really work on that belief system, and it's still a work in progress for me too. So I'd say that's the core. That's like the real core of what we work on.
Do you think that the fact that you started working at the age of 14 was an advantage for you because you were comfortable in a working environment, making decisions, and perhaps even, making mistakes and seeing the consequences of that?
Good question. I haven't thought about that much. I would say, yeah. I'd say I feel like it's been an advantage and a disadvantage. So the advantage is it's given me a lot of experience, and professionally, I learned how to operate in a professional environment. Maybe I learned more about management. I learned more about collaboration and cooperating with people and getting things done, and how you make money. All very important skills. I'd say the disadvantage would be that it became such a way of life for me too, that I never didn't work. So in some ways, I probably didn't cut myself enough slack. So I didn't take a break in my career until more recently. As I was starting up my business, in a sense, that was, right before that, there was a bit of a break and some time that I had taken off. And it was a way to kind of get back in touch with who I really was, and without that definition of work, being so involved in work so many hours a day.
I respect Sedona tremendously because how old are you again, Sedona?
I'm 19.
19. And look at her.
Wow.
She's a producer of my show, and
That's
I have very high standards. And you started working pretty early. What was that like?
I did. I started working at a dance studio that I was studying at when I was about 12 or 13. I started doing it like training, and I did it for trade. And then when I was 15, I think then I like went on payroll, and I was a teacher, a part-time teacher there. And I'd have to say the same. I mean, I haven't been in the workforce that long, but I have never not worked, and I've worked about like 4 or 5 different jobs since then, and they've all been like super great experiences. But to me, I wanted to get into the workforce early because I really think that I think that things don't always come that easy, and you kind of have to work for what you really want. And I just know that I'm not going to get there by sitting at home or that type of thing. And I think that has caused some problems. I've had some health problems because I've never take a break. But other than that, it really kind of showed me that you can do whatever you want. There is no age limit on it.
Well, if memory serves me well, Sedona, I'm not so sure it's your work ethic. I think it's your nutritional habits that may cause some health issues. It's all that junk food that you eat.
Yes, that too. Yeah, part of that was I didn't want to take a break from work, and I ended up dancing too long on some pretty bad injuries, and then I was out for about a year, so that taught me a lesson. So I learned from that experience and not to let things go too far. But yes, nutrition is a problem.
So let me ask you another question, Sedona, and we'll have Shannon, coach us or coach you a little bit. What are some of the challenges that you've discovered or experienced, being a woman, and being a young woman for that matter, if there have been any, and whatever you're allowed to say on the radio show or not, that's okay too.
I really don't face, if anything, I have sometimes thought that things came fairly easily, like maybe a little bit too easily to me. So I think sometimes that can go both ways, and then you kind of question why you get jobs or why you kind of get the role. And I think that can have a really negative impact, because then you start, it's almost like when things come too easily, then you work too hard at that point because you feel like you don't deserve it. And I think that's a big problem, that sometimes you don't have to kill yourself to get a job. You don't have to like do these things. And so I think that that's kind of like messed with my psyche a little bit. And I've looked at like what other people were doing to get jobs. And sometimes like when I was looking to work at a restaurant when I was in high school to make more money than producing and what I was doing at the time, I found that type of job was really hard to get. When I turned in my resume, they said I was overqualified for things. And to me, I didn't understand why a high schooler couldn't work at a restaurant type thing. So those are really the two main things that I've seen.
So what would you say, Shannon? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no worries. No, that's interesting experience, Sedona, about things coming too easy. And I get that. Like, when you talk about that, I get the sense of it's like being in alignment, right? Like when things really happen and come together, it's because you're in alignment and you're going after what you want. And so when I look back on my career, I think things were fairly easy for me in a lot of ways. When I decided I wanted to make a career pivot, I picked a target, I went that way, and I got the job. But I know I've always kind of had this mindset of like, well, of course, like, why not? Why wouldn't I get that job? And so I think there's a lot of different things to consider when something's not going. So a lot of different circumstances that can come into play, but sometimes it could be because they're not in alignment. They're not heading in a direction that is going to be maybe the best direction for them, or it's just not working for one reason or another. So it's like that, okay, how many times are you going to beat your head against a wall versus going, okay, maybe I need to go a little bit to the right, and that's going to be more of like the downstream direction for me, if that makes sense. But there's always, I mean, people definitely come on hard times. People get laid off, the economy, tanks, and then everybody's having a hard time. So it's so circumstantial too. But I think that's a core piece, absolutely, is the believing. Like, so don't I get the sense that you're like, you have a sense of self-worth where you just kind of go after it, and so it comes into place because you believe you deserve it. Does that resonate?
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So I'd like to tackle a very complex task. And I guess the complex task this time, it's not about women, it's about men. Okay. And more specifically, so when you talk about belief systems and how women have certain belief systems about either their self-worth, you've talked about self-worth, about what their talents and gifts are, about how they need to show up, and all these things. So on the one hand, when you're coaching a woman to give herself permission and to find and explore those gifts and discover those gifts and manifest those gifts, which in of itself, that's a huge achievement when you get to do that for women. And I'd like to dive into that in just a little bit. But for the moment is, how do you coach the women, when they have all that all together? So they've got the self-confidence, they realize who they are, they own their space. Now to navigate that world that still does not believe them, that still doesn't want to give them the respect or whatever. How do you coach women in that respect to be able to overcome that hurdle or challenge, or just be okay with it?
Yeah. So interesting. I was thinking through this as you're asking. I'm like, most of the women that need my help, that come to me, that I work with, really, we do need to work a lot on the worthiness and the confidence. So I would say the women that are drawn to work with me are the ones that have growth to do in that area. So, but to answer your question, I think, because I'm trying to think back even on moments in my own personal life where I felt like I was going after something. I felt like I deserved this happening. I wasn't feeling heard. I think you come up with a decision of, is this something that I can, let's say it's in a current work situation. There's a decision of, does this work for me? Does this make me feel good to be in this situation? Can I compromise or tolerate this? Or do I need to be somewhere else where I am going to have a voice and I will be heard, and it's not so much of an uphill battle? So I think it's about just really assessing, what that current situation is, and do I need to change it? Because there's no reason to stay in a situation that's just not working anymore. And just so that I do with women is like, what feels good? How do you want to feel when you're at work? So like for me, one of the words I think about a lot is radiance and freedom. Like freedom was my number one driver and why I eventually started my own business. And so a lot of the women that I'm working with too are kind of desiring that freedom and radiance also. So I'd say that sometimes it's a matter of, you just need to leave the situation. Either, I'll talk with women about different tactics about how to handle situations at work or through interviews. And if it's just a dead end or it's just very unsatisfying for that particular person, it's time to move on and be where they can be happy and celebrated and inspired by the work they do.
Right. I'm always so impressed by competence, and I guess in my world, competence is very critical. As a surgeon, I have to work with competent people. I have to have a high level of competence because, people are relying on me, and anything short of that is just really not fair for the person that, I'm treating. And so I recognize competence in other people, and I really don't differentiate between men and women or, skin color or anything like that. In fact, I get excited when I see, particular people with that competence, because it also, they're also teachers for me. And honestly, I get particularly excited nowadays when I see these incredible, awesome women in all sorts of positions of politics or corporations. Like, wow, this is pretty cool. And realizing the hurdles that they actually have to overcome. And so I think what's important for all of us is to realize exactly and appreciate exactly what you just said, whether you're a woman or not, is, understanding that, are you secure in what it is that you're doing? Are you confident in your own abilities? What work have you done to really explore, what your talents are? And I think many people, unfortunately, are not tapping into their talents. And I think that was also one of your personal experiences when you were back in college. I mean, you picked architecture because you thought that was a cool thing to do, and realized that, you were hopelessly bad at calculus and what else?
Calculus and drafting, two core
And draft,
pieces
yeah,
of architecture. Yeah.
two critical parts of the architecture, and said, okay, great,
Yeah.
not good, going to do something else. And then you found your sweet spot. And unfortunately, I think what happens is that too many people just don't discover what that sweet spot is. And so already they're in this space of discomfort, and don't know how to get out of that. And they're struggling and making it all very, what I would say, personal. And so my addition to what you would say is that when someone has that confidence, or even if they don't have that confidence quite yet, but they're secure that they're doing the right thing, they're doing it with integrity, and if it's not resonating with the world around you, don't take it personal. And I find that helps me a lot when I'm in any kind of relationship that I have, and I regard anything that I have a relationship with, even my computer right now. I mean, if it's not working, I'm not going to take it personal. But it's really true in these kinds of situations. Way too often, it's easy for us to take blame for some sort of nonsense that's happening in the other person. And because that's how those, getting back to your belief systems, we were taught, from very, wee ages, that, well, you're bad at this, and you did this wrong, you made this mistake, and I'm going to punish you this and everything else. And so as an adult, when there's a dissonance in our situation, our relationship, that we take the blame. And it's not the same as being accountable. I mean, you have to be responsible and accountable for your own stuff, but not the stuff of other people. And I think that might be helpful, for anyone to realize that, take responsibility for your own stuff. Don't take it personal. And if it doesn't resolve, move on. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I'll say I love that. I love that you said that, because that's one of the biggest gifts that I've given myself, is to stop taking things so personal and worrying. I used to worry a lot about what other people thought about me, and are they, can I make them happy, or are they going to be pleased with me? And so when I learned to shed a lot of that, it just, because when you're so focused on what other people think, and then also the other piece, not taking accountability, you're not growing. You're not really tuning into who you really are, and what do you believe. And if you're worried about what other people are thinking, or what other feedback you're getting from other people. So yeah, that's a big one.
And the truth is this concept of accountability. I think a lot of people really quite misunderstand that, and it's really just about having your own personal awareness of your own role in what's going on, and realizing that, you're going to make mistakes, that you have faults and you have weaknesses. And I think for me, that was my personal big epiphany a couple of years ago, when I was able to go on this magnificent trip to Ecuador with a group of messengers, and sharing, our wisdom with others. But prior to that experience, I realized, you know what? I'm going to celebrate my faults and my weaknesses. I'm going to own them, and it wasn't always fun, but bring them into my awareness. I realized, great, I can change something. I know something now that I don't like about myself. I'm not making myself wrong, and it's also something that I can now work on. It may take a day, a week, a month, or years, but at least I'm owning that. I'm accountable for that. I can navigate around it, and I'm not blaming somebody else and feeling guilty about something that I'm not aware of. And so I think that's key. So how do you help people with changing their belief systems? Because I'm always curious about that. How other coaches and other people help others with belief systems that people are so stuck with sometimes, that sometimes they seem impossible to change.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So where I like to start with that is first asking, where does that belief come from? Do you know when that started? Where does that come from? Sometimes people will know, like maybe it's a belief that their mother had, or their father said about them, and they took it on as their own belief about who they are, or about what's possible. But often people can't tune into that. They're not sure. They've had that belief for so long. It's just part of who they are. So sometimes what we'll work on is, okay, so how can we flip that around? So what do you want to believe instead? So we're deciding today that you're going to believe something different because this belief is no longer serving you. It's not bringing you joy. It's not getting you where you want to go in life and in your career. So how can we turn this around? What do you want to believe instead? And that's where we get into like more of the possibility. What's possible for you? And it doesn't always happen overnight, right? As you know, changing belief structures can take a while, and it can slowly evolve one layer at a time. But I find that just bringing awareness to it and questioning it, that can be the huge catalyst just right there. Like, I think that a lot of us, I know I went through life a lot just believing certain things about myself or believing other things about other people, right? Which can be very dangerous, right? And gets us in a lot of trouble and limits us greatly. So I think just calling attention to it and questioning it can be pretty monumental for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one of the things that I always like to look at is, or challenge people with, is simply the question of, is that really true? And then have them really start analyzing that and deciding, is that really true? And I know that Katie Byron did something called the work or something. I forget exactly how she positioned it, but she has a great strategy. Are you familiar with that one?
I am, yeah. Byron Katie, I think it is. Yeah. She's great. She's great. She's a tough cookie, and I love she just calls it. She calls it what it is and questions it. I love it.
And she calls it exactly what it is, and it helps you just discover, okay, where are the gaps, where are the wrinkles in your belief, and once you find that wrinkle, you can get a wedge in and then absolutely change it. Because ultimately, I think, and you basically said this before, it's sort of like, what is it that you really want? And if you want something else than what this belief is telling you or is going to deliver, is that the kind of life that you ultimately want to have? And that might be able to get some leverage in saying, no, that's not what I want. I want something else. Let's change the truth.
A question I love, I learned this from one of my mentors, is what are you getting out of believing that? Like what let's say like as some sort of self-sabotage habit or behavior, what are you getting out of by believing this? Because even if it's a negative thing that's happening in our lives, we're getting something out of it. Like, well, what are you getting out of, let's say, playing small? Well, it keeps me from being so vulnerable, or, I can play a victim role or whatever it might be. So often we're getting something out of maybe a smaller belief of ourselves. It's a perceived kind of protection for us.
I totally agree with that. And just to add to that, one of the most phenomenal coaches in the world, and you've heard of course, Tony Robbins, he talks about the 6 human behavioral needs. And it's interesting, and for anybody who's not familiar with the human needs, according to Tony Robbins, the 6 ones, the primary ones are certainty, and then uncertainty or variety, love, connection, significance, and the more spiritual needs are growth and contribution. And what he says, what's interesting is that, we have to satisfy these needs. And sometimes that need becomes so strong and powerful that we will actually compromise and sacrifice our own values and beliefs just to satisfy those needs. And so it's an interesting, part of the coaching process is helping people discover exactly, what you're saying. What is it that you're really getting out of all this?
Yeah.
So giving permission, what's that about?
It's funny. It's when did I adopt that phrase? It was several years ago. I remember actually being on a plane when I was working at a job, monster.com. It was one of the most fun jobs I've had in my career. And this was probably, this had to have been like 6-8 years ago. So like me formulating this business and the coaching started, 9-10 years ago for me. And I remember writing down the phrase, give yourself permission. And it just seemed so powerful to me. So it could apply to anything. What are you not giving yourself permission to do, to be, to have? You know, maybe it's permission to, you know, I think about like when I bought my condo, you know, I was honestly, I was waiting for that husband to come along before I bought my first piece of property. And I thought, well, why not just get it now? What am I waiting for? So it's about giving yourself permission to have what you want, giving yourself permission to go after your desires, because in reality, likely no one else is going to give you permission and say, yeah, go ahead and have that. You can have that. So it's about giving yourself that permission to go after that thing that you want, or that career vision that you have, or if someone wants to make a move to a different city, or you know, whatever it might be. So what I think that does is it puts the power back with the individual, right? Instead of relying on someone else, waiting for someone else to make something happen, you take that power back and go, yeah, I can give myself permission to do this thing, or to have this thing, or to be this kind of person, to be this expression that I want to be of who I am.
I love that word, and I use it all the time, by the way, as well. I use it slightly differently than yours, but contextually, it's basically the same. And I tell people, you know, give yourself permission to be human, and it's so true. And again, it's just owning your own faults and weaknesses, and being okay with the fact that you're messing up, or but perhaps you're just messing up in your mind and not anybody else's, and that's even worse. And it's interesting because, you know, we're so worried about being rejected or losing, you know, love, that we need this validation from other people. And I notice that often in coaching, but also in relationships I've had in the past, where people just were the victim. And I think so many people in this world are just at the effect of the world around them. They're just simply the victim of the circumstances. And so blame the environment around themselves, you know, for their position or status in life. When the truth is that, you know, you make your own decisions, you're in charge of your own brain, and therefore you're in charge of your decisions. And so not being wrong is okay too. And so giving yourself permission just to mess it up. But also, and I think maybe it was Byron Katie too who said this, and I'm getting names mixed up. But also giving yourself permission to be the opposite, being magnificent. Because at times it's that fear of being greater than yourself right now, than you're behaving, which that greatness is actually inside of you. There's 20 times more inside of you than we all give ourselves credit for. But the problem with that sometimes is that you can get rejected as well, because you're greater than everybody else. And it's not that you're better than anybody else, but you are more successful. And I remember an exercise I did again with Tony Robbins, and this is on I think the first day or second day of Unleash the Power Within, where he asks you to just write down all of your wishes, all of your dreams. Say in 5 years, what are all the things that you could have? I mean, if you could never fail. And I was writing down, I want my 5 houses and my 20 cars, and I started feeling guilty, like I can't have all these things, right? And it's like you said, you self-sabotage yourself. And so giving yourself permission to be everything that you can be, including, you know, the shadows, you know, part of yourself. And that's why I respect Sedona so much, because she's got this big vision in her future, right, Sedona?
I do.
And you're giving yourself permission to go after that?
I sure am. I just don't want to have any regrets.
Awesome. So what are your thoughts about that, what I just shared, Shannon?
Yeah, I think that, so one thing that you reminded me of is one of my favorite phrases is that life is messy. So it's not always going to be perfect. And also, what I find a lot of people struggling with is this need to be perfect, like for things to be perfect, or waiting for the perfect timing or the right moment, or my work is, you know, this project at work is not finished until it's perfect. So letting it be good enough And I say this knowing that this has been something I've had to work on a lot, and I continue to work on myself too, because I come from a background of like wanting things to be perfect also. So yeah, so I love it. I think letting life be messy, letting us be imperfect, because that's what being human is all about, is life is messy and imperfect, and we just do the best that we can, and we learn and we grow, and sometimes we fail, and that's okay. And what did you learn from that experience? I think that's the best gift you can give yourself, is looking at those messy moments and go, okay, well, what did I learn from this, and what do I want instead? How do I want to do it different next time?
I love what you just said there. And in the world of entrepreneurs, there's a subset of entrepreneurs that I guess are called the exponential entrepreneur. And these are the super successful people. And these are the people that created Amazon and PayPal and all these things. And what's interesting is that, their mantra in a sense is fail often, fail quickly, and fail forward. And so failure is a great thing, because they talk specifically, and this is a book by I think it's Peter Diamandis, on bold. And what I love what he said was, if you're waiting for perfection, if you're waiting for everything to be absolutely right, it's going to be too late, because somebody else will have created something that's good enough, like you said, and then tried it out and really dialed into what the world is wanting, with their new product. And so that's so very, very true, what you said. So I know we're slowly wrapping up, and there's a really important question that I'd like you to answer and share with us and give us some insights. Is that, you were in the corporate world for about 20 years, and you realized at some point that you weren't resonating, with that culture anymore for whatever reason. And that's when, when people burn out, when you're struggling and fighting so hard, against the current, and you can only take so much of this. And so you made a decision, and really, like the title of our show, I mean, the biggest risk is to do what you love. And so what was that like for you, taking this risk, and what was your approach? I mean, how was it that you were able to justify making that decision, besides the fact that, you want to do what you love, or maybe that's all that it was?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was quite a journey for me. So I say that some people will get a push out of the nest, and I got the drop kick out of the nest. So I had lost a job. It was the biggest job of my career in corporate, and I had a decision to make, to go back and continue doing what I had been doing, or to pursue my dreams and to start my business and do something that to me was bigger in the world, more meaningful. And that was for me, right? That's my passion. That's what I feel is my purpose in life. And I had always been very risk adverse. And this is why I never just left a corporate job to go do my own thing. And I didn't even really, go start it on the side. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. I don't know if you guys are. But so when I decided for me, it was a turning point. What I needed was to find a mentor. So when I found my mentor to help me start my business, then I felt like, okay, I have this structure and this mentor that will, that will help me carve out this path that I'm on. So I think I had to get to a point, for me personally, my experience was I went through 3 years. It was an evolution of 3 years of getting to complete burnout, injuring my shoulder from all the computer work, working 12 hours a day. I'm certified in nutrition, and I was having, wine and cheese and crackers for dinner, and I knew better, right? And so it was my wake up call. I had my wake up call. And that gave me the fire, like that lit the fire under me. Like, how did I get here? And this is uncomfortable, and this needs to change. I want something different. And then I was ready to take that leap and take the biggest risk I'd say I've taken in my life. And it's been absolutely worth it along the way. And it still has this very uncertain moments where I feel like I'm on that ledge and like, what's next? I don't see that next safety net. When's it going to come? And this is now the journey that I've chosen to be on, and I'm incredibly grateful to be doing it.
So let me ask you this. Did you do some sort of like risk assessment? What is it that you're willing to tolerate? What's acceptable, what's non-negotiable? One thing when we look at our model, other people's success, one that comes to mind for me all the time is the story of Richard Branson. How he, what is his approach, for taking risk, and what he looks at, what's the downside? Can I live with the downside? What if it all fails? Can I do that? And that's what he did with Virgin Airlines. And I don't know if you know the story, and just very briefly, he made the arrangements, I think it was Boeing at the time, that, if it all went under, that Boeing would take back all of his airplanes and he'd be, debt free. And so that's just thinking in advance. Another great phrase from Tony Robbins is, maturity is knowing the results in advance. So what is it that you did, if you will, in assessing that risk or mitigating any challenges? How did you prepare yourself?
Good question. So it's funny. I think since taking this risk, I've become a little bit of a leap and then figure it out person, but I think I've always kind of done that in some ways in my life. That said, I'm also very security minded. So part of my safety net was having savings. So I've always been very good at saving money. And so that was my safety net. And so I gave myself some runway and some timing. Okay. I've got, a year and a half to kind of figure this out and, have, like my backup plan could be like, I can go back and get a job, a job if I really had to. And other than that, I wouldn't say that it was a super calculated risk. It was more just a fire was lit under me and I was ready to take that leap. And I was just going full force. I was just going to, it required a lot of letting go and like trusting the process. Just trusting that because I'm very purpose based in the work that I'm doing. I'm mission based with my business. So for me, it's also a lot of reliance on my spiritual beliefs that when I'm on the right path, that things are going to come together. And so far, that's going very well for me. So I'd say it's part practicality and then part like trusting the universe on this.
Yeah, I think that's great. My personal approach to the things that I do today is simply just having confidence in myself that, I have what it takes to do anything that I really would want to do. Now, that doesn't mean that the environment around me or the structures around me are going to allow me to do that, and that's okay. So I'm not going to take it personally that I can't achieve, something in particular. But here's the other thing that actually has helped me quite a bit. Is number one, to realize what is it that I'm really passionate about. And what I'm passionate about is creating change, enhancing life, and developing peaceful awareness. And so that underlies the fabric of everything that I do. And so rather than picking something specific, it's sort of like, okay, this is in alignment with what my passion is. And so I do the plastic surgery, I do the stem cells, I have the radio show, I write books, I coach, and it's all about creating change. I do photography as well. It's all about creating change, enhancing life, and it works really well for me. And an important part too is that I'm also unattached to a particular outcome. Yes, I want something, but it's okay if it doesn't happen. So I'm going to do my best to do that, and sometimes maybe I don't do enough. But I'm also at a stage of life where I'm saying, look, I really want to enjoy my life. And the most important part is being around people. And that's another asset that I think that would help people take that big risk, is having people around you, as you have found, that can also mentor you. You really want those people. So anyhow, I'd like to wrap it up. I am Dr. Bart Rademacher, a prescription for your transformation, real people, real conversations, real success, having a delightful conversation with Shannon Rey Gibbs, talking about, coaching professional women to find fulfillment in what they love to do. How do people find you briefly, Shannon?
They can find me at my website at Shannon-Rey, that's REY.com.
Awesome. And any last words of wisdom that you can share with Sedona, myself, and anybody else listening?
Yeah, I would just say take time to pause, like really pause, and think about what it is you really want. Think about what it is you really desire and consider the possibilities. So just ask, what if? And one of my favorite sayings is, if not now, then when? So just ask yourself that.
Love it. And doing that almost every day through meditation really helps. So I really want to thank you for today. It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Sedona, too, for your insights and inputs and personal experience. And I hope, I know you learned something today. So once again, I'm Dr. Bart Rademacher, Prescription for Your Transformation, Real People, Real Conversations, Real Success. I'll be back next week. And thank you both so much.
Thank you. This is fun.